disagree on something here. I've actually viewed mobile games or the downloadable games or what you would call the indie games as more similar to the old school Atari cartridges. I mean, they're smaller games. They don't have quite the breadth of experience that you'll find in Skyrim or something. I mean, they're just like these smaller chunks of fun. And something like Angry Birds, I think Angry Birds is a brilliant game, and I love the art design and the sound design in Angry Birds, and I always talk about it. It's just such a cool game. That game could have easily been on the Atari 2600, and it doesn't look like Gran Turismo 5, or Forza 4. I mean, it's like these cartoon birds, but it's as popular, if not more popular, than these giant AAA titles with the big graphics. Maybe have better art in the realistic sense, but not in that kind of catchy universal acceptance sense.
Right. Well, I mean, art doesn't, to become art, it doesn't mean that something has to be realistic looking, right? I always say, there are three voices to video games that it is specific and unique to video games over any other form of media. So the three voices are quite simply the voice of the designer or the author. Mm-hmm. Right? They have a story, a progression, an arc in which their game world lives and exists, and they impart that in the game. The second voice is the game itself, the mechanics of the game. How do the mechanics of grappling and jumping and movement convey to the player how you are to interact within its space? And then the third voice is the gamer itself. Because if we do not play the game, it's not art. Mm-hmm. And the interesting thing about video games versus every other form of media, I believe, is that the experience that you walk away with in playing a game and the experience I walk away in playing that same game can be entirely different. And so it isn't necessarily about how realistic it is. It's can you understand the intent of the author or the artist, mm-hmm. internalize it, and what comes back out, the resultant feeling, the experience that you have, that is when art is achieved. So it isn't necessarily about how good does Nathan Drake look, jumping on vines, the characters in that game, or the way they interact with each other. Yes, that's one frame of reference for an action-adventure game. But I can make the same argument for the first time I played Pitfall and mm-hmm. watched Pitfall Harry traverse alligator heads, mm-hmm. jumping on vines, missing quicksand, falling down pits, jumping over scorpions, all these sorts of things. It's the same exact feeling and sense of adventure that I got. They're just placed in two different frames.
Mm-hmm. Now, tell me about the book, or tell the audience about the book. What will viewers get from The Art of Video Games?
Well, I just happen to have a copy right here. So,
from Pac-Man to Mass Effect, I love it.
Pac-Man to Mass Effect. So, The Art of Video Games book basically follows the same construct that we have created for the Art of Video Games exhibition. What we've done is we've taken 80 games that are displayed across 20 systems. So there are 4 games per system, mm-hmm. 1 game representing a different genre of games. Now these genres are very large, loose buckets, right? So we have adventure, we have target, we have action, and we have tactics and strategy. Mm-hmm. Now, for those of you that are keenly aware and are looking at my Star Wars poster behind me, that spells AT-AT, just as an aside. So what you're able to do then is the way we have it laid out, if you were at the exhibition to experience this, if you were to follow all of the action games across all the different consoles, you'd actually be able to literally view the evolution of the form over time. Mm-hmm. What we've tried to do is mirror that in the book. So we break it up into sections that tell you at the bottom what section we're in. Is it the Bit Wars era? Is it the 8-bit era? Is it a transition era? What the platform is, what the genre is. So you can start to follow along and see, the beautiful artwork and kind of experience a bit of the exhibition.
Now, I got to ask a quick question. Did you include the Empire Strikes Back video game for the Atari 2600?
No, I did not, but one of the interesting things when we look at the appropriation of popular culture into the appropriation of popular culture by artists into their games, what you get are things like Attack of the Mutant Camels, right, by Jeff Minter on the Commodore 64, mm-hmm. which is the AT-AT scene from Empire, except that Jeff, whose company is Llamasoft, and likes to make games with llamas in it and these sorts of things.
Well, who
Changed
doesn't?
giant AT-ATs to camels. And so here you had one designer's take on what was going on in the world at the time, a piece of popular culture, put his own spin on it, appropriated it, and turned it into something that became different.
So from Pac-Man to Mass Effect, and those are actually two great examples because Pac-Man is I think to this day still a beautifully well designed game, and I spent a lot of time in Mass Effect 2 at least, and I think that game is also gorgeous, but on a totally different level. I mean, it's like night and day on one hand, but as you're saying, it's all together. It's all art.
That's right.
Now, what
That's right. Now, also in the book, we've interviewed, I believe we have 15 or so interviews that we've done with everyone from Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari and Chuck E. Cheese, all the way to Tim Schafer. And so we've kind of covered this breadth of designers, breadth of artists over time to basically explain what inspires them. What was it about video games that drew them to this medium versus all others? What is their greatest hope for where video games can go, what they can mean for society? And I have to tell you, in all my years of working in the games industry and knowing many of these people personally for a long time, the interviews that we did are some of the most candid interviews I've ever seen with these folks. Back when we back when we shot these interviews.
You're dating yourself.
Tune in next week, kids, because it's going to be on the dial. And so
on Betamax.
Exactly, chunk. So, we interviewed, I think we did 24 interviews in 27 hours during GDC of 2010.
Okay.
And there was, at some point during these interviews, we would have to stop the camera because people were becoming overwhelmed with emotion in talking about really why video games are important to them. What is it about video games that either changed the trajectory of their life, or what were some of the experiences they had of people who played their games and how did it affect their lives? So it's very, very personal. It's very introspective. And I think the materials that are laid out in the book, from the design of the layouts to the text that tries to tease out the thoughts behind the games. It's almost like peeling back the veneer of the game to understand what the artist was trying to do and convey. So between the graphics, the teasing of that dialogue out, and these interviews, I think people are in for a real surprise with this book.
And what can people expect from the Smithsonian Art Exhibit?
Well, this is the first art exhibition that the American Art Museum has done that is actually focused on video games. So this is a first. It will run for 6 months in Washington, D.C., and then it will travel to 10 more venues through the end of 2015 around the country. Coming into the exhibition, which is about 6,000 square feet in size, you will be presented with everything from cloth maps and concept art and kind of the early form of media that came with games. You'll hear from the designers directly. You'll hear about what inspires them, what their philosophy is, what their perspective is on the future of games. You'll then move into another area where there are 5 playable games. And those games are, in order, Pac-Man, original arcade, Super Mario Brothers, Myst, The Secret of Monkey Island, and Flower.
Okay.
So these are one game from each of the 5 eras that we talk about. And these games are each a game that has done something significant within its era. Mm-hmm. Pac-Man setting in place all the mechanics for Maze as we know it, right? And it's funny when you take a look at something like that and you extrapolate it out and say in something like Crackdown, where you were jumping from rooftop to rooftop to collect orbs, or in Flower, which essentially is Pac-Man, right? Collecting enough flowers to go ahead and basically clear the board. You're able to kind of hear these echoes of design. And so we kind of have those in one room. And then the last room is the examination of the 80 games across 20 platforms, 4 genres, spanning 4 years. So all in all, if you viewed every piece of material that we have in the exhibition, it would take you well over 3 hours just to experience it all.
So viewers who want to really get a good taste of this need to go to Washington, D.C., or at least keep an eye out on what you do. Have a website, Twitter. Where can they learn about the traveling exhibition and go see this?
So if you go to the American Art Museum website through the Smithsonian, and actually there is a link. We'll make sure that we get a link for you that you can put up that tells people where to go.
Got it.
There's also something that they're doing, which is really, really cool for the exhibition. They're allowing the public to do micro donations to get their name in the exhibition in the credits, and they have this digital credit list. So it's the first time the museum's ever done something like this as well. So it allows people to get their names into this historical exhibition, which is pretty cool.